session, each one's a little different. Today's is for example, last week we had Chi-Chi Nyaga Nash from the city of Baltimore, who runs the Department of General Services. And so the entire meeting was just, each one of the cohort literally asking questions about, is there some, when she asks, she starts out with, what can I do for you? And so the whole thing was just an interactive conversation. Today, we're still going to be interactive, but I know you have slides and a presentation. The entire event will be recorded. We have a YouTube channel for Accelerate Baltimore that the recordings are uploaded on after Celine cuts out, like this kind of part of of the recording, and then we'll add it that way. So it is time to get kicked off. I give it about 5 minutes. Just to say, for the folks that have signed in again, we've been really fortunate to have actually done this virtually this year. It started out as really a concern about how we were going to deliver. What we're doing is delivering, to 20 to 30 CEOs in addition to our 5 that have been signing on, many people, regular attendees. And so, it's really a pleasure to be able to sort of expand the knowledge and share the knowledge. It seems like our city's going to get shut down soon, or we're kind of hoping we'd be able to have a, closing ceremony where everyone's going to get together. That doesn't look like it's going to be happening. It looks like we're going in the wrong direction. So I really appreciate the participants, and I appreciate you, Heather and Carol, and Deborah's support for what we've been doing. This is our 9th week out of 13, so we're really stretching into the end here. We started with this kind of deductive learning process. You start real wide on, and then kind of narrow in on specific things. And so the teams in week 8, we called it a prove it or pivot point. And each one of the teams have submitted a revised, updated revenue model and a log of a minimum of 30 customer discovery phone calls. We've also been sort of tying that in with our coaches for Pitch Creator and tying it in with our mentors, just in terms of helping to incorporate those practices into the business and really understanding how those calls are helping to shape the model. So, sort of finishing off this journey with you today is wonderful, because I really feel like, we had a thought about trying to make it really good when we were coming up with the curriculum, but it really kind of fell into place. And one of the things that Neil Davis, my colleague who helped to put this together, the curriculum together, was like, you got to get Heather Fields and Carol Hargrave, right? So you guys had to be a part of this year's curriculum. I'm really proud to do that. As everyone knows, Deb Tillett is the executive director, and I sort of, let's say, godmother of the community of entrepreneurship here in Baltimore. I mean, just really,
for real.
Yeah, just here has stories and history, and she's been grinding for years and has ground through growing it, and then now grinding it through, losing people in a physical space and sort of regaining that trust with folks in the virtual space. And so I'm proud and happy, Deb, that you haven't been around as much. I know you listen in from time to time, but I know you've been busy and allowing me to go ahead and handle most of these moderations. I'm glad you're able to moderate today, and I'm really happy that we've had the opportunity to do this, to have you and Carol and Heather, all old buddies in this business, and really kind of focusing our planning right now on product market fit. And one last thing, you would not know how important that word was. I just got off a call with Angel and a potential board member, investor advisor, and boy, was it all about product market fit, and boy, did he give us some amazing insights. So good. I'm excited, I'm pumped up. This is going to be a great session. We'll just kind of go until we end, and then that's it. So Deb, the show is yours.
Thank you, John. The check's in the mail. That was all really great stuff that you said about me, Carol, Heather, I'm going to come at this quickly with a few short stories. Again, I am a serial entrepreneur. I started my first company in 1985 before there was even an internet. So I'm coming at this from a completely different point of view when it comes to competitive assessment and product market fit, because there was no such thing as Google. You couldn't search for anything back in the day. You had to buy a Hoover's book and subscription and all stuff that none of you guys were around and will remember. But that said, I'm going to let Heather and Carol introduce themselves, but I want to come at this with a couple of really interesting stories. One, I think John already shared with you, but it was really timely to get Inc. magazine's November 2020. And they had a whole page on how to beat the competition. And the one I love the best is buy an old phone number. So when brothers Barrick and Josh took over American Drapery Systems from their parents 4 years ago, they learned a local competitor in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area had changed its phone number after being acquired by a larger company. So they learned that for $10 a month, they could have any and all calls placed to that old number. And it's been such a solid pipeline of leads that the brothers have bought 2 other competitors' abandoned numbers as well. So you gotta use your imagination. So remember, here's the personal part of this story for me. So again, no internet, no computers. And I started my first company and I'm trying to figure out, it was a fashion photography company. My partner was a very talented fashion photographer and I did all the business stuff. But what were we going to charge? We were new in this business. Who were our competitors? What did we need to do? So I got on the phone. I called up all the competitors and I said, hi, my name is Debbie and I'm doing a paper for my school. And can you tell me kind of what you charge and everything and who your customers are? They fucking told you everything. They told you everything. They thought you were a kid, that you were writing a paper. That's a competitive assessment. How do you get that information? And then my absolute last story, I promise, and then we'll get to the real meat of this, is one of the first technology companies I worked for was a computer gaming company. And the 2 guys that started that gaming company started it in 1982, believe it or not. I joined in 89. One of them was the biz dev guy. The other was the little nerd computer guy, Sid Meier. And so the biz dev guy just kicked on and he went to, Best Buy and GameStop. And he was like, you want to take F-15 Strike Eagle. And they were like, get out. We don't even know who you are. You're not Atari. You're not Electronic Arts. So he went home and he got his friends and he got his family and he got them all together and he said, okay, we're going to call GameStop and Best Buy and ask them if they have F-15 Strike Eagle. So we spent 3 days calling saying, hey, do you have F-15 Strike Eagle? Do you have F-15? And then after that, a day later, he went back in again. He knocked on the door and he said, would you like to put F-15 Strike Eagle on the shelves? And he sold out, right? So be creative. Be creative. Understand that it isn't all about Google now that you can. And know who your competition is, what your product has that is going to be above and beyond what their product offers, and move forward. And with that, Heather, Carol, introduce yourselves and away we go.
Sure. Okay, I'll go first. Alphabetical order, Carol.
Sure.
First, John, thanks for having us. Deb, thank you so much for moderating. Not only are you the godmother of entrepreneurship, but as we all observe, you have the coolest glasses. I always admire your glasses. So I'm Heather Fields. I guess, whereas Deb is a serial entrepreneur, I guess I'm a serial startup marketer. I've worked at a number of startups here in the Baltimore area. I'm currently at Vitus Vet. So we are a software company serving practices across North America, as well as millions of pet owners with our free Pet Owner app. Check it out on the App Store if you don't already have it. Prior to Vitus Vet, I was at a couple of other local startups you might know. I was the vice president of marketing at Order Up, our acquisition by Groupon. And previous to that, I was at Bill Me Later, which is now PayPal up in Timonium, which is where Carol and I got together. So those are two. I've been very fortunate to have worked with a lot of incredible entrepreneurs. I'm so blessed to have just met so many wonderfully inspiring entrepreneurs, not just directly through my job, but also through this type of program, working at Accelerate Baltimore and with TEDco. So thank you to the courageous entrepreneurs on the line with us today. Without you, we wouldn't be growing businesses here in Maryland. So I'm thankful for that.
Great. I'm Carol Hargrave. I would call myself an accidental startup marketer. I came from a big company, big corporations, banks. And sadly, I'm back at a big company again, but I had a little bit of a stint in the middle with startups. Like Heather said, I started working with startup marketing at Bill Me Later, where we met and used a lot of those kinds of guerrilla marketing, guerrilla sales tactics that Deb was talking about. I remember those Hoover's books, even back then at Bill Me Later, we used all of those tactics. I spent a little bit of time at another startup that some of you might have started to see here on, as you're doing your shopping, Klarna. Spent about a year and a half, 2 years with them, building their marketing space out for the European markets and for the US market. Came back and I've done some other work. Got involved with ETC and Deb Tillett and did some work with TEDco. And Heather and I have, worked on a bunch of these different projects together and speaking engagements. And I love the vibe here, the startup vibe here in Baltimore. We're, building a better city for all of us. And I think that's amazing. And for the state of Maryland. And I thought it was really interesting, Deb, when you were talking about when you do research your competitors, and we'll get into our slide deck, which is really meant to be conversational. But when you were talking about, calling your competitors to do your competitive research, that's not just a startup thing. So I'm back at PayPal. I'm back at a big company. We do that all the time. That's a big piece of our competitor research is calling, getting as much information as we can from our competitors to understand how they're positioning themselves, what their pricing is, understanding what their strategy is. So it's a powerful tool to understand who your competitors are. Just talk to them. People love to talk.
Yeah, it is a wonderful way to get information and understand, and then find yourself in the place where you could be a little bit more expensive or a little less expensive than your competitor, and depending on the value that you are creating and offering. So with that said, again, we want to keep this casual. If there are questions, put them in the chat. And Heather, Carol, I'm going to turn it over to you with the slide deck. And I may interrupt you, as I am wont to do sometimes. But
yeah, please do.
Yeah.
So Deb, in the spirit of keeping it casual, I have to let my dog out. I'm so sorry. He's over here barking at me, so I'll just be 1 minute. So not even a minute, like 30
Well,
seconds.
that's why I'm here at the office instead of at home, because I've got a feisty little French bulldog.
Funny.
So.
Well, and at some point, my big fat orange fuzzy cat is likely to walk across the screen. He loves to be on camera. So he'll be around at some point. No matter where I put my desk, I try to put it up high, and you would be amazed at how that big fat cat is able to jump and get on the desk. So
Okay, can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll skip the title slide. And Carol, I guess you want to take it away?
Sure. So we're going to take you, we just kind of broke this into 4 different parts of the conversation on competitive market fit and understanding your competitors. One is knowing the problem, knowing the space, which is, and we'll get into a little bit more, but really knowing, the whole space around the problem that you're solving and those competitors that are in that space. And then we'll talk through, how some of the tactics like calling your competitors, how you can understand the competition, and then really knowing the customer. So we'll get into all four of those. And again, this is meant to be conversational. We've just kind of put some slides together to guide the conversation, but stop us at any point and we can dig into your questions more, because I think your questions are more interesting than a set agenda.
Yeah.
And so this is probably some of the work that you've already been doing as you've been building out your product market fit and just figuring out your financials. So you've probably done a lot of this, but I think it goes, it's good to be reminded how to think about. It's good to be reminded about how to think about the problem and revisiting that often. So, the first thing that I think all entrepreneurs and startup companies need to think about, and all companies really, is there a problem? There's a tendency, I think, for all of us to come up with an idea that we think is fantastic and let that idea define the problem. When the only tool you have is a hammer and everything's a nail. So I think that's the critical thing, to constantly go back and look at it. And I think, one of the examples that Heather and I talked about when we were starting to go through this presentation and think about how we wanted to talk about it, when we were both at Bill Me Later, we had a merchant that we worked with that was fantastic, especially in the early 2000s, J. Crew. You probably all know J. Crew. You kind of probably all know the story of kind of the rise and fall of J. Crew. But in the early 2000s, they were all over it, right? Like, they started as a catalog company in like the 40s, and they had built out, their product and they'd found their customer and they knew who she was. They hired this woman, Jenna. Jenna knew who her customer was. She was the ideal J. Crew customer. But all along in the early 2000s, Mickey Drexler, who came in and was their CEO, he was convinced that they were an in-store brand only. Didn't really, and he's even said, like, as he exited J. Crew, he didn't really see the whole online digital boom coming. He just missed it because he had a solution. It was this, in-store experience of, the Jenna model in the store. And that was the only solution he saw. And the digital wave just kind of, the digital wave and fast fashion just came in and completely disrupted them. They're out of bankruptcy now, but they, Mickey is gone, Jenna is gone, like that. They were just so disrupted because they didn't see, what, if they were still solving a problem or if the problem still existed.
Carol,
right?
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm reminded of one really infamous now, but famous story about, is there a problem? So back in the day when the US was sending its first astronauts into space, they had real worries about sending a pen up there because of gravity and how was the ink going to work. Well, guess what? The Russians sent a pencil, right? So it's a true story, right? So is there a problem? Well, the problem is, how are you going to write something in anti-gravity space? Pencil.
I think that is so, it's so poignant as you're thinking through the problem, right? Like, the more elegant the solution, like the simpler the solution, the more elegant and the easier it is for your customer to adopt it.
Yeah.
Right. So don't figure out how to create a pen that can write upside down, which the U.S. astronaut program did do.
Right.
I think there are a couple of examples from VitusVet in the veterinary space. One of the solutions that we offer is a two-way texting product. So the practice literally can text back and forth with pet owners who might be requesting an appointment or a refill for a medication for their pet. And I'd say up until early 2020, the product had good adoption, and clients who were using it absolutely loved it, especially because they recognize that pet owners are, we've got a lot of millennial pet owners now who, texting is just de facto way we communicate. But fast forward to COVID, and now you have to text to survive as a practice. So we really kind of understood the problem, but we're a little bit ahead of our core customer. So fast forward COVID, you're not even allowed inside a practice. You need texting to communicate with the pet parent sitting out in their car in the parking lot. So, we were aware there was a problem, but we didn't do a really great job sort of educating or creating that sense of urgency with most practices across the country. But again, like fast forward, wow, is there a problem? And so we were luckily able to like quickly, pivot our strategy internally back to that product. It was actually a product that was sort of, dusty, sort of sitting on the shelf. It was a delightful product, but not very expensive. We were focused on something else early this year, but recognizing, the right product for the right time, we dusted that off and had 2 of our biggest months ever as a business because of that. So just kind of like wanted to share that with you guys to think about, like there can be like a timing thing to this as well.
Absolutely. I think timing is like, that's one of the things that we're seeing so much right now. I'm at PayPal in that online retail space. Like we're seeing the retailers who are thriving right now are the ones that were able to pivot and bring their offering to market in a new way that solves the problem that people have right now of being at home and having to work the way that we're all working right now. Right now it's waist up fashion is huge. So the retailers who've been able to figure out how to make you look good from the waist up. I have my leggings on right now, but my waist up blouse, and because people are not able to go to the salon, they're not able to go to the spa or get their massages. All of those products are just surging right now because we're able to. Beauty companies were able to figure out how to repackage their items and turn them into a solution for being at home.
Yeah, I'd say telemedicine is another interesting technology in our space as well. So telemedicine has been here for a while in human medicine, but of course is like grown exponentially this year. And so that was definitely something that we were seeing early in 2020 in our space. A lot of the telemedicine platforms, shifted and tried to pick up other segments like veterinary. And so that's been interesting to watch. I think telemedicine is definitely here to stay. In human medicine, of course, I love it. In veterinary, there are definitely some use cases, but in general, I don't think that the market will be big enough. But definitely in our space, again, veterinarians had to fast forward and think about telemedicine this year faster than they would have. It would have been probably 5 years down the line without COVID. So
I also think because of remote learning and having to do that the ed tech space is finally going to achieve
absolutely
the goals that we've been working on for the past almost 20 years.
Absolutely.
This will move that along. Let's keep going with the next slide. Yeah.
So the next thing I think really, and we started to touch on this, is really knowing the space. How are people solving that problem today? The pencil example is a great example of that. I think another really great example is a Accelerate Baltimore alum, Clear Mask, right? Like they were solving a problem, which is still a real problem of, there you go, of, people who are hearing impaired or have other communication difficulties needing to have their health providers wear a clear mask so that they can communicate. That's still a problem, and it's still a solution that they're creating. But they were able to pivot really well and understanding how people are solving this problem of having to wear masks everywhere. And they were able to turn around and change their product enough that they were able to make it affordable, and you could order, because they were never supposed to be a direct-to-consumer product, but they pivoted and have brought this product to market in a great way because they really understood the space and they understood the opportunity of having to wear masks. So knowing
I also
your space
think
well
one
enough.
of the things that is really good for them is everyone having to wear masks, and younger kids and younger children not being able to see the face of a teacher, a parent, someone in charge, which is really critical. Absolutely critical. So they've really taken advantage. I noticed that it's Apple headquarters in Silicon Valley has ordered the clear mask for all of their.
That's amazing.
Yeah, for all of their employees.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
So, and even beyond, the customers who are going to be using your product, knowing that the rest of the space, who's covering the space, like making sure you understand the media that's covering your space, the influencers who are talking about your space, and building those relationships. I think that's another place where Clear Mask has done an amazing job, right? Like they have developed those relationships. And so when they made their pivot, they had the relationships established to go in and say, we pivoted. Can you talk about our new product line? And they're able to bring that, as they understand the investors in the space. So understanding, who are the early seed investors, and then the next level investors, and following what they're like, get to know them, do a little bit of stalking, follow them on Facebook, follow them on LinkedIn, read their articles and know who they are, so that when, you do have those, so you can see where the market is going, you can see where they think the market is going, so that when you're having the conversations with them, you're able to tell them why you're taking it in the same direction or a different direction. But you gotta find them, follow them, and know them, and know what they're talking about. And I know Heather is amazing at this. She's a stalker extraordinaire.
I'm definitely a stalker. I follow, my favorite investor to follow is Fred Wilson with USV. I just think he's an incredible investor. I love his blog. If you don't follow it, like, highly recommend it. He's just so great at like breaking down investing in general, and just what's happening, trends. And so he and I are like-minded from a political perspective, so that makes it good for me. I love him. But like Carol said, I definitely have a list of influencers, which I have a spreadsheet. I love Google Sheets. I have a list of people I constantly add to it. I'm following them on LinkedIn, Twitter. In the case of competition, which I'll get to on the next slide, I'm going to be following them on Instagram and social media. So kind of depending on who the person is, I might expand my stalking, but I also look for Medium articles. So yeah, I'm totally agreeing with Carol. If I see them speaking on a podcast, I will listen to that recording on a weekend. I just think we all can learn a lot from people in our space or in an adjacent space, as Carol said, or covering our space. And it's definitely, I've picked up some really good tips over time that I've used in my career. So
I think that's a really good point. Like the adjacent spaces are really important to follow and understand too, because that's going to tell you how people are solving the problem today. So, as you know your market, and as you know what people are doing today, whether that's nothing or using a bunch of products linked together or an inferior product, whatever they're doing to solve that problem today, following those spaces and knowing who's talking about those spaces, investing in those spaces, that will help you understand, how you're going to break through.
And I can give you an example from my space. So, we're veterinary, and veterinarians, for the most part, are independent small businesses. There's 30,000 practices in the country. About half of them are independent. The rest of them are big corporate groups. And so I think about the veterinarians as I used to think about restaurants that order up. Restaurants, for the most part, independent small businesses, the entrepreneur running the restaurant, super busy, really hard to get in touch with. At Order Up, on average, it would take us 66 calls or visits to talk to the restaurant owner. We really had to grind it out to get to a restaurant to accept Order Up delivery. And that's real similar to veterinary. It takes a lot of time to break through to get to the right person in a veterinarian. So for me, I'm paying attention to folks who offer sort of similar CRM systems in the restaurant space. So Toast is a really good example of that. And lucky for me, a lot of my former Order Up colleagues are at Toast. So I can, kind of keep in touch with what they're learning. We're not competitive. And so we often will share like what's working in restaurant or what's working in veterinary. And we share that back and forth because, again, we're not competing. And we see helping small businesses as the win. So we're not, we don't feel like we're competing. So we share that information. So if that gives you any food for thought on your own innovation, I share that spirit.
Heather, one of the things that in the chat section, there was gentleman, David O, that has been making comments about, well, what about if there is no market, or what if I'm the first one there, and what if I want to make my new market? And I think you just addressed it, but I just kind of wanted to bring life to that comment or those comments, because, from where I stand, it's like there's always a status quo, regardless of whether there's a market, a competitor. The status quo means it's being done or not done. And so you still have to follow it. It's not like you can suddenly, walk into something because of your brilliant idea and think there's no competitors.
Well, I think I saw David's question, did Facebook have any competitors when starting? I mean, obviously there weren't social networks when Facebook.
But they did. MySpace.
But there were bulletin boards. Right? Well, there was MySpace. There were bulletin boards.
And Friendster, and
Black Planet. There were other things.
Right.
There was plenty of.
Someone is doing it somehow right now, and that's
right.
what.
And before MySpace and Friendster, there was people were doing the online chat boards. They were they were doing a lot of what is actually happening now. They were creating the smaller communities, and that's now happening on Facebook.
Right, with rare exception with, and even if you go back to Edison and, thinking through electricity, I mean, Tesla was there too, right?
Tesla was there. There was gas lanterns before that.
There were gas lanterns before that. Tesla was there. So
I think
the market is there. It's just how you adapt to it and
that's right.
And become innovative around it.
Not knowing what David's working on, I mean, be happy to talk to him directly after the session, just to kind of talk it over. But whoever you're selling to, their mind space is somewhere. So you're going to compete for mind space with whomever you're selling to. So I think about it like that too. Like maybe you're creating something new, but you've got to break through with that individual. And so you are going to need to figure out how to make them care about what you think is so.
And it's like the iPhone question that he raised too. Yeah, iPhone was a little interesting, but we had cell phones. So carrying a portable phone, goes back as far as the early 90s, So
I had one of those big phones.
I did.
I had one of those big phones, man. I was so cool with that thing, man.
I think that
it was like about 12
touch on
pounds.
this in a bit, but I think don't forget your biggest competition could possibly be doing nothing. Right. Like there's now that, inertia is a big competitor.
Yeah.
Especially if, if it's a consumer,
Yeah, we'll get to that. Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Want me to dive into this one, Deb?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think, again, just talking about product market fit, it is really important to understand your, the end customer. And so just some things that I've learned over time about knowing the customer is, one, you need to be your customer, right? You need to eat your own dog food, understand your solution inside and out. But you also have to recognize that you're not the customer, because being inside your four walls, if you will, you're biased. So you can no longer actually kind of get into the real shoes of your customer. So just kind of have to, put a pin in that to remember that. So some things that I wanted to share there, let's just say you think your customer. I hope you're understanding that the customer in November of 2020 is not the same customer as November of 2019.
That's for sure.
So much has changed. What I thought I knew in February of this year is no longer relevant. It just is not. So for me, the way that I've always operated is you must always be in touch with your customers. And that can take many forms, right? That can be, you've got some sort of NPS automated scoring. So you can see trends over time, like how they're, rating you and ingest that information and, share that and correct along the way. You may be doing regular surveying of your customers, and this can be done very inexpensively with Typeform or SurveyMonkey, or there's a few other tools out there. I personally love Typeform, and I make it our job to interview customers on a monthly basis using Typeform on a topic that's relevant to our business, either in here or in the future. We have two customer bases. We have pet owners and we have practices. And so we try to survey each of those once a month. And so, as I've said, it's not just marketing's responsibility, or it's not just the CEO's responsibility. As you add members to your team, it is everyone's responsibility for the customer. And I'm working with a bunch of introverts over here at Vitus Vet, and my veterinary teams are a bunch of introverts. So it's not always easy to get that insight, but you have to keep at it, because your development team will be better for it. Your support team will be better for it. Your engineers will be better for it. Marketing absolutely will be better for it. So you have to think about this as everyone's job. And at Vitus Vet, like, we should, I don't know if we're there quite yet, but at Order Up, like, this was part of your goals. Like, you needed to be on the ground talking to customers and sharing whatever the heck you learned. And so, many of my startups, we've embraced Slack. And so, we're constantly sharing every little nugget that we can so that we all get smarter together. In my own current practice, as I said, I'm surveying customers, and I always ask the customer, like, would you be willing to do a 15-minute phone call with us in exchange for a gift card? You get a lot of people to say yes, especially this time of year, because people love those gift cards to re-gift. But those one-on-one interviews are gold. I record those. I transcribe those, I share those via Slack, and we, really try to require the team to listen to those. And as we're all working from home, it's not hard to listen to a bunch of interviews back to back. They're 15 minutes or so, and you can just get so much smarter, so much faster if you actually kind of get outside your four walls and do that listening. I wanted to share a couple of ideas, or just observations through my career where this really paid off. So one of them was Order Up. When I went to Order Up, the team was very young. We were, prevalent on a lot of college campuses across the country, super successful in the campuses where we operated. But there was sort of this belief that our top customer was, kids at the fraternity or sorority, or, sophomores in the dorms are out partying, and then they're ordering pizza on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or, their hangover breakfast bagel on Sunday morning. And, that's great. That was a hypothesis that I could, fall in line with, but I really wanted to know, like, quantitatively or qualitatively, that was the case, because I was going to be making some, $1 million decisions here on marketing. And so I had my entire team survey our customers, and I segmented, into two places. One, I wanted to talk to our top customers, and through that, I mean the people spending the most money. And then two, new customers, the one who had just started ordering with us, to understand what brought them to us. And then two, why were they still sticking around? And this is a little intimidating for my team there, because they were all real young, sort of just out of college themselves. Pretty much all communication was text or mobile based. They weren't used to picking up a phone and calling and talking to customers. But once we did that, what we learned was our top customer was law students on these campuses who, they're just heads down studying all day. And so they would order breakfast, lunch, and dinner to be delivered. And they had the money to do that because of their student loans for the most part. And two were international students. And international students on many of our campuses, kind of lived together in an international apartment building that they sort of self-selected, self-professed, intimidated by the general huge population at, let's say, Penn State, for example. They wouldn't be out at bars at night, so they wouldn't have encountered us otherwise. We're doing grassroots marketing, handing out flyers at bars, and using brand ambassadors to interact with people. They wouldn't have found us that way. And so those were two epiphanies that we leveraged in every new market we went to. So we would find out where the law students lived. We would find out where the international students lived. We would do a lot of heavy up marketing there during our launch week, because if we could win them, we would start getting steady orders in the door, steady revenue. And then from there, we could build out to the other populations. And so that's an Order Up experience where, without challenging the internal bias, we probably would have taken a lot longer to figure that out.
But Heather, that gets us back to even where I started the conversation, which is you got to think outside the box.
Yeah.
You can't just go along like this. And, I've been known all my life as an other-directed thinker. I mean, I don't think like other people do. And consequently, you come up with ideas that most people are going to look at and say, what are you, nuts? I mean, that's not how you do it. And yet, indeed, that is how you do it.
It is.
Thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
sorry to take over. It's the All the Deb All the Time channel, but my one story like that is I worked at an ad agency, a small startup ad agency. And again, we were talking about the early 80s, and we were going after the Playboy trade accounts. So Playboy magazine and the trade account. So the president called us all in. He sent us away and said, I want you to come back with, spec ads that we can take to Playboy and win this account. So an art director friend of mine and I went away, spent most of the night just thinking through it. We came back in the next morning, and everybody else had these big, layouts of ads and commercials and stuff they were going to do, all these big boards. And all we had was a Playboy magazine.
Yeah.
And I opened it up to the centerfold, the naked lady, and she said, "Hi, baby." So the centerfold talked to you because I had just gotten a Christmas card that when you opened it, it sang Jingle Bells to you, right? So we got the account. Now, Playboy never did that, made this naked centerfold lady talk to you, but it was great. It got us the account.
Yep.
So
Can I make?
Oh, sorry. I'll just share two more things to build on that. So one, I agree with you, Deb. Like sorry, furry coworker, not happy with me. I always ask, what if? So anybody on my team brings an idea, and I'm very open to new ideas. I don't have a monopoly on information, but I always ask, what if we did it this way, or what if we did it that way? So I think you constantly want to get into that like questioning mode. Two, lost my train of thought there. Shoot, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back. My dog.
Angel has a question.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I wanted to know, so we're in this startup phase, right? And we are in customer discovery, and it's all based on who we think our customers are. And as I go down this process, there's so many different ways that we could imagine sort of entering into the market. And so I wondered if you had any advice on when you're still discovering who your customer is, how you should go about that. And if there's potentially multiple different kinds of customers, how do you get to know them?
Do you have any customers at all?
Not yet. We haven't launched yet.
Do you have a hypothesis about who the customer is?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Who do you think it is?
Well, I think that it's C-suite leaders in companies. I think it's boards of companies. I think it could also potentially be governing bodies that hold specific accountable for different standards.
Got it.
Have you talked to anyone? Have you talked to any C-suite or managing? Because I think that's the first place to start, right? Is start talking to them and understanding their needs. And I think you've probably already started doing this, but like, what is the market size and opportunity with each of those? I think the easiest easiest way to enter the market is with an MVP, right? So you can start to build that data and understand like where you're going to start to get traction, but don't be afraid to pivot, because you have to start somewhere, and then you can pivot once you start to get those learnings and hopefully discover that there's either a bigger market or a different market that you need to go after.
But Carol, I would weigh in and say you need to start out and do one thing and one thing well.
That's right.
So choose
exactly
from what you think the customers are and concentrate on that one, and that is one potential line of revenue. And then as you bring on, say, another customer, wow, that is a second revenue stream. But again, MVP and one thing well, and the most likely in your case is that C-suite, the folks that are now all having to understand inclusivity and equity and getting their best practices in place.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Carol and Deb said. I would try to even narrow it more, like who in the C-suite has most at stake there? Who has the biggest pain? from not having your solution right now. And I might focus on that person as my primary buyer to start, just to kind of focus your efforts and do as many interviews as I can with that type of person. So if it's the head of people operations, for example, I'd want to talk to, you know, maybe 10, depending on what your market size is, like just interview them consistently to understand the problem as they see it. How big is the pain for them? You know, what solutions are out there in their mind? You know, what are they reading to find solutions? There are some adjacent, you know, businesses that you might look at, like they're probably also looking at HR technology. You know, maybe you could explore some of that, like what are they using from HR technology perspective, where, you know, maybe those are partner opportunities for you down the road somehow. So that might be how I would cut it, Angel. And I'm happy to spend some more time with you after the event, like kind of just brainstorming too.
And as you get into market and start getting the learnings and gathering the data, you know, you may find you need to slightly pivot to grow your market opportunity, but you'll have the data to know where to start. Last year I was working with a startup out of Colorado called Dignify. They do they do auto repair loans, and they started out as a direct to consumer company on these loans, you know, doing short-term loans to consumers. It's a tough go, like any kind of finance direct to consumer lending is just it's a tough slog because it's hard to get to those customers. So eventually they pivoted and started selling through dealers, which grew their business a lot. But then they found out that dealers were really looking, so consumers loved the product, but dealers, where they could actually grow their market and, you know, really gain share in the market, dealers wanted a loyalty product. They wanted to kind of lock that customer in to coming to them for repairs instead of going to their local repair shop or somewhere else. They wanted to, you know, keep you coming back to the dealer because there's more profit in the repair center. And then if you come there for repairs, you're likely to buy your next car from them. So then they pivoted to a loyalty product, and now they just signed their Series A. So like they were able to build, you know, they were able to build those building blocks by getting into market with an MVP, you know, getting some data, getting some customers that then they could take on to the next step and, you know, those different opportunities.
Yeah, two more things on this. So Carol and I both have worked together a number of times, and I totally agree. Like, get those first early customers on board, white glove treatment for the first, you know, 5 or 10, and learn as much as you can from those. That's exactly what we did at Bill Me Later. You know, we just cultivated the heck out of our first 5 to 10 customers and learned so much, you know, which ultimately drove a lot of changes in the business and made us more successful. One other tactic I'm using right now to know my customer, again, she's very busy. She belongs to a lot of private Facebook groups where they, you know, kind of give each other advice, and, you know, there are discussion boards and bitch boards too, sort of in a way. And we're not allowed to be on those because we're a vendor. So I actually have a couple of practice managers who I pay to monitor those boards for me. And so, you know, on a regular basis, they'll send me a report of like, what are the topics that are important to this audience now? You know, what are they talking about? Do we come up? Are they talking about the competition? Are they looking for something? Is there a new pain that I'm not aware of? And so there are ways to get in front of this audience that don't necessarily require you. It just requires you to be thinking a little bit more outside the box, as Deb said. Those private conversations are, again, those nuggets are really gold, and we wouldn't have gotten them otherwise.
Let's keep moving.
Go ahead, John. I just wanted to make a quick time check on things. And if I could just make one other point about what your last slide was, you don't have to go back to it, but I just really felt that it's really important. I see it happening so often that marketing is viewed by, you know, the startup a lot of times will have one person focusing on that, and then not the CEO, not the CTO, not all the rest of the team. And it really is everyone on the team. It's everybody's job. So I just wanted to reiterate that point. I thought on your slide it was a critical point, because it's really not about stovepiping marketing and research in any way at all. That was just a side note, but I just butted in because we're running here we've got maybe another 15 minutes. So
Okay. And just on that, like, don't hoard information too. Whatever you learn, share it. So something like Slack is great, even if it's a small nugget from like some testing you've done, or you're starting to hear some customer support, inquiries come in. Like, share it, share it, share it. So important. So on knowing the competition, I think it was David. I think I can't see the discussion board because I'm sharing my screen, but he was saying, there aren't known competitors because it's a new market. But as we made the point earlier, like, inertia is a really big competitor. Like, they may choose to do nothing. They may not care about your market or your solution. So you have to think about, how do you overcome inertia? It's a powerful competitor. And so some of the things that I've done, I become the customer of my competition. So on my phone today, you would see the apps of all of the other pet owner apps. I follow them on a monthly basis. I look at their websites to see what's changed. I look at their app on a monthly basis. If I'm not getting sort of any notifications, I want to be on top of that because I can sense like changes in partnerships, changes in their strategy when they don't show something to me anymore. I follow my counterpart at the competition, see what he or she is up to and who he or she is following. I follow the top employee, I follow these guys on social, Google Alerts, all of that. I listen to their podcasts. I listen to them as guests on podcasts. Reading 10Ks, if you have a public company in your competitor set, oh my gosh, you will learn so much by reading the 10K. And not just reading it, but looking at it. Like, the images that companies are using tells you something about their strategy. Like, visual is very intentional. So if you're starting to see changes visually, that might be a clue to you. Something's changing here and you just need to pay attention to it. Something I picked up in my career. So again, another real life story, Order Up. We didn't have, we had Series A funding, which we were using to try and learn as much as possible about how we could scale across the country. But we didn't have the deep pockets of our competitors. And so I followed Grubhub quite a bit to see like, what were they doing? And the reason I did that was, and like even at PayPal, when we worked at Bill Me Later, those companies spend a lot of money on research. So if they're doing something, you can pretty much rely on the fact that they've like researched the heck out of it. And so there's probably something there that you can learn, so you don't have to kind of learn the hard way. Like, you might be able to mimic what they're doing, but still differentiate yourself. And so with Grubhub, their CEO did a podcast where he let slip that one of their signature tactics was doing transportation advertising. So ads on buses or train stations, taxi cabs. And he mentioned the reason they did that was because often those ads would last for months beyond your contract because, buses and taxi cab drivers just don't have time to bring the vehicles back into the shop to switch out the ads. And so, we had never considered doing either of those because they're very expensive, but we took a flying leap on it back in 2015 here in Baltimore. And you can still see Order Up ads on tops of taxis today, 5 years later. The company doesn't even exist anymore. It was acquired. But he was absolutely right. Like, taxi cab drivers just want to be out driving. They don't want to bring the cab into the cab shop to change out that cab topper. And so again, by listening for those little nuggets, you can get really smart. And those cab tops drove us a ton of new customers across the country. Very inexpensive. The ROI on that is off the charts. And today, we still actually have our Order Up Slack. And so often we'll all share photos of taxis as we see them driving around town. So again, just be open to like learning from your competition too. You don't have to be a me too. But don't be opposed to being a me too also if it's something smart for you. I've shared on the screen a couple of tools that I've used. So I mentioned Fly on the Wall for you. There's some other tools out there. So competition, like, you want to know how popular they are in social media potentially. There's a tool called Awario. You can do a free trial there and see how they're doing and how you're doing. Nowadays, I had the point here, like, social is not optional no matter who you're dealing with. So you need to be out there monitoring what's happening. I talked to another local startup recently, and he's a developer, entrepreneur, and he's not social. It's not comfortable for him, but he recognizes like he's got to be on social and he's forcing himself to do that. So do that too if you're not. Similar Web, you can see what they're doing from a online ad strategy, and you might be able to learn from that. Spyglass lets you see, like, from search perspective, like, what are they backlinking to? And you can get smarter about like their content strategy. Might give you some ideas about what you should be doing. And then BuzzSumo is another one where you can monitor content. So these are free tools, or you can get free trials, or they're dirt cheap. So again, I would try these for who you think your competition is or adjacent spaces. Again, just try to get smarter yourself beyond, like we said, picking up the phone and calling or just doing Google. I'll turn it over to the other ladies.
You have
think those are-
another slide, or is that it?
Good. Oh yeah, I guess Carol, you want to talk about this, or you want me to dive on that?
I don't remember. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
I think no. I think that's. Sorry, I forgot. I had forgotten we had added this. Yeah. I mean, I think this is really important. This is something I think that I've been really proud to be a part of PayPal over the last year because we've been so strong on values. Our CEO has really put our values out there. He talks about it every time he's on an earnings call. He talks about it in social media. That's something that we bring to all of our marketing and all of our on the consumer side and the merchant side, being a values driven company. Like when you stand for something, you need to let your customers know, like whether you're B2B or B2C or a mix of the two, you need to let your customers know what your values are. And having strong values, it brings more customers to you, it brings more media attention, it brings more influencer attention. It's a whole system that works together, and it's great for your employees too. As you start to build your business and build your employee base, communicating those values to your employees creates loyalty there, and that loyalty goes out into the customer, into your customers. So
one thing that I would, it looks like this is your last slide, but the one thing that I want to put out there is, I've been in marketing most of my career. That's certainly what my school, college was, communications, marketing. But back in the day, and even to a certain extent, marketing never got to the C level, right? Got to the CEO or C level, because marketing, maybe at best you were a vice president, maybe at best, because marketing was just something that oh yeah, companies need to do. But it never really got to the executive suite until just recently. And I think that was so wrong, because marketing is A, everybody in your company's job, but B, it really is an executive level position, because everything that you guys were just talking about is at the executive level. You need to operate, act like, and be at that executive level. And a lot of people diminish, marketing as, okay, we'll get a kid right out of school and have them do social media for us. No, it's about strategy. It's about, who you are and the differentiations. So A, this was a key session, and B, it is a key piece of any company, but most especially startups. So
Cool.
Any questions
before
out
we
there?
wrap up? Yeah, let's do that. Before we wrap and see if there's any more out there.
I always have time for questions, so I can.
You always do, Angel. Go ahead.
Well, so I'm thinking about how to turn like these insights from like your understanding about your customer into your own like branding and marketing experience. Just I was hoping that you would go deeper there because that's something that I am I would say a researcher and an applied researcher first, and I want everything to be perfect before coming out. And I have a website that has been sitting and not being launched because I keep wanting to change this and change that, and every time I talk to somebody else, like, oh, we got to add this. And so
Perfection is the enemy of done.
Yeah, go live now.
Don't let the great get in the way of the good.
Yeah,
That's right.
You learn once you're live. You have no idea what people are going to respond to or what they're going to look at. Like
That's
you
right.
can add Hotjar, you can ask people to look at it, you can do usertesting.com, but until you go live, you won't learn. So you're hurting yourself by not gathering intelligence. So I encourage you to go
Absolutely.
live. And guess what? You can change it in a flash. You really can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really want the feedback. You really want people, users, to give the information back to you so you can make it better.
Yeah. So Angel, like just some real world experiences for me there. We're constantly doing A/B testing on our website. So we're testing like our hero module on the homepage. We have 2 different versions running, trying to learn which value prop resonates. We'll try different images. Same thing with our email. We do all subject line testing, Facebook ads. You can run a boatload of those real cheap and get real smart, real fast about what people are responding to. So there's no shortage of things you can do, but you do have to kind of get started. And then I always kind of have like what I call a learning agenda. Like, what am I trying to learn? And then how am I going to do it?
Yep.
Right. And then I just get going.
You have to get it out there because perfection will kill you in terms of getting the actual learnings that you need to get. But then in terms of bringing those learnings back in, like having a learning agenda is important. Having your value proposition, value framework for your product, and then figuring out as you get those learnings where what's resonating from that value prop and that value framework that you build, what's not resonating. So take that feedback in to help you understand what's working, what's not working, and where you need to pivot. And don't be afraid to go back and test some of those learnings again, right? Because it could be that people didn't understand the value proposition. It could be that it wasn't resonating at the time, right? Like what resonated, like Heather said, in November of 19 versus November of 20 are 2 different things. So, you're going to have to be flexible and go back and continue to test.
Yeah. From my own experience last year, you might say text payments, but right now, contactless payment. So, I mean, just real simple words there, but it definitely resonates more now to say contactless, stay safe, remote. But yeah, I mean, Angel, hey, I'm happy to talk to you like afterward too, because I know we're running up on time, but if you want to kind of, I'm more than happy to do that. I love like speaking with local entrepreneurs like yourself. I don't know if we responded to David's comments there about like large companies can't pivot as quick as small companies and all that good stuff. I am going to call BS on that, David, having worked at both. I can tell you right now, I would absolutely positively love to have the new technology budget of PayPal compared to VitusBet. Yes, but no.
Yeah, that is just a fundamental issue.
It's arrogant to think that. I'm just going to say, be careful because they're spending millions of dollars researching, testing new technology. They have access to, millions of consumers, so they can get super smart, super fast, my friend.
Right, and we have active here at ETC and even in the city ecosystem of startups, we're actively looking at larger companies and some of the innovation that they're doing, and they realize themselves with the onset of technology that it takes a while for them to turn the curve and move, but they have to keep trying and they have to keep doing it. So
if you can partner with somebody, who's not a competitor, you might be able to tap into their technology even to benefit your business. Nationwide Pet Insurance is an investor in VitusBet. Believe me, they have a lot deeper pockets and a bigger marketing squad than we have. And so, being a friendly partner of theirs, we're able to do some things we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, like maybe
partnerships are critical to moving fast.
Yeah, the other question that David brings up is, do you need marketing if you solve a problem in a new way? Hell yeah. Because how are you going to tell people about it?
Well, call it whatever you want, but you
can call it whatever you want, but if you've got something and you solved a problem, who's going to buy it if they don't know about it? And if you don't tell them about it? So marketing is key.
there's a tendency to think like, Apple didn't really do any marketing. There's another company that, that we compete with, Stripe, like supposedly they didn't have a marketing department and they didn't do any marketing. And now they're one of the biggest payment processors in the world. That's BS, right? Like, of course they did marketing. They just didn't have a marketing department and they didn't have a CMO, but they still, of course, did marketing, right? Like they were still creating branding. They were still, creating messaging to their customers, and they were still getting that messaging out. Whatever department you put that in or whatever you call it, that's marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I could just say thank you, all of you, for the session today. I get the feeling that I know a couple of the members of our cohort weren't able to make it today, so we'll be sharing the video with them. And I really appreciate you putting your contact information on the screen, because there will be follow-up, and I'm sure many questions specifically about this. One thing I've learned about our cohort is that there's a lot of real there's integrity in the curiosity of the process. There's not a whole bunch of folks that are just assuming they know everything, and just kind of like that you read a story and you kind of like, okay, I know. I don't want to make any specific remark about some of the comments in the chat, but it sort of makes me feel like that's a know-it-all, and the teams aren't going to benefit by doing that. And so the one-on-ones, the ability to follow up with this conversation and make them personal conversations relative to those businesses are very helpful. We thank you very much for that added support, as Baltimoreans should do. So next week we're going to go into a deep dive on the TAM. With Neil Davis, who's sort of put it together, and then we're at the end. Carol and Heather, I hope you will make sure you get the invite, but I hope you think about attending our closing ceremony, when we will have an opportunity for you to see the before and after of the program. And so we're really excited about that coming up on the, I think it's the 8th of December, I'm not exactly sure, but we'll send it out to you.
Oh, I can't wait.
Thank you very much for your participation today. And for everybody out there, and Deb, of course, for your stories, and just the typical Deb butting in and really nailing people. I love it. Thank you so much for your participation. Of course, Angel, always asking probative, important questions that move the conversation forward. Everyone else, we'll talk next week. Thank you very much for your participation. Bye.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.